Welcome to Moksa Workflow Manager Training movies. This is exercise number 5, in which we will play around with setting record field values. In a workflow, it can be useful to be able to save the information that was created in the workflow, to save that information to the records that are being processed. An example is the additional information like a SKU that the user has entered into the workflow. That information that is part of a workflow field could be saved to the records in that workflow. Another example is the workflow manager could be used to interact with an external tool like RoboFlow, where RoboFlow is watching a catalog, waiting to be triggered to do a certain process, to perform a task. In that case, can be useful to be able to set a status value that RoboFlow might act on. The third example is that the user could be asked to enter information in a record, to add maybe some information that that particular user has about that record. So that too could be very useful. We will start with building a new workflow, and then we will talk a little bit about workflow parameters. So let's get to work. I'm again not going to create a new workflow completely from scratch, but I'm going to take a previous workflow and duplicate that workflow, and of course give it a new name. Exercise number 5, and we will set field value. So in this example, I'm going to open the workflow graph, and again I'm not going to start here from scratch. I'm going to load the tasks from my workflow number 2, which gives me a head start. So if you duplicate a workflow, it's always a two-step thing, because you can either choose to have the same workflow set up as another workflow, which is the category, and that could be useful because in this workflow setup you could have, for instance, additional info fields or other parameters set that you want to copy. So that is a reason to copy a workflow. And you could want to import tasks from another workflow, not the tasks being actually the Cumulus records. In this workflow, we are already having 2 swim lanes, design and marketing. And in design starts with a commission task, is asked to deliver a file, and then it will be approved in the approval task, and finally a collection is created. We are going to personalize this a little bit. As you remember from the task we have in this workflow, we have already a SKU and a plant. So we are going to add a task that saves that information to the record that is provided. So here I am going to delete that task, and I'm going in the swim lane to add a new task, and this task will be a set field value task. What am I going to set? Several things. First of all, I'm going to say here approved, set approved status. That means that we are going to set a status field to OK. And a second field, in the caption, for instance, I'm going to set a different field. You have all the placeholders here in a text file, so you can easily copy and paste them. So I want a workflow field and I want a specific workflow field with a name, and the name is SKU. As I said before, I want to pick up the SKU, so I'm putting here the SKU. And here normally you have to add the GUID. You can get the GUID from a field in the catalog like this, but let me first create this. You can go to the preferences, same for the record fields or for the catalog fields, that doesn't matter. Category fields or record fields is the same thing. You have here a column. If that column does not appear, then you can add it by checking this, and then you go, in this case I want the additional info fields, so I'm looking for additional info fields, and I simply double click. If I now go back to my workflow task and I say edit task, I can quickly here just do Control V, and you see that he adds that GUID of the field. And the parameter that I'm looking for, as we saw before, is called SKU. So that's the field value that I want to store. I can say save in this case. And if I go back to my workflow, I can say whenever with a new outlet something is approved, I will send it here. Now I can add a new task. New task, set field value task, and I can say set rejected status. And again here I can say status, and I can say not okay. And I'm not going to do the other field, because when it's not okay I don't want to save the information, because probably this file will disappear, will be thrown away. So if I have a look in my workflow, I can say here edit. That was not what I wanted to do. I can say here new outlet, rejected, and like that. So if the file is rejected, he will send it here, and the status of that field will be set to rejected. If it is approved, it will set it to OK here, and then he will also pick up the additional SKU that we added. So that's how you can set that up. This is what we need to do to set record field values. So one thing, you can act on what a user has chosen, or you can also just get information out of the workflow. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to enable, in the commission task, we are going to create the functionality, or add the functionality that a user can set field values. How do we do that? Well, we are not using this part. To be able to set a field value, we are doing that with the workflow parameters. The first thing is that I'm going to give you a little bit of explanation about the workflow parameters. The workflow parameters are a set of parameters that are specific for the workflow manager, and that are visible in this field workflow parameters. There's a lot of parameters, and only some of them need to be set. The others have default values. In the different movies, I will point to these different parameters, and you will get to learn to know them that way. The very first and initial and important one is the workflow parameters exist on 4 levels. They exist here, and maybe you have an older version and then this will not even be visible. then it's the other 3 levels that count. But this is the top level where you set the IP address of the Cumulus server that the workflow has to connect to. You always have to set the username and password of the Cumulus administrator. Always set an asset handling set that is able to work with your assets and with the vaulted catalogs. Always define a permission template. If you are working in a workgroup environment without permission templates, you can leave that empty. The workflow catalog should always be $catalog, $workflows, and this is the default temp folder where all kinds of stuff is temporarily stored. If you want it someplace else, please specify it somewhere else. The upload catalog by default is workflow assets. You can change it into your catalog if you prefer, and we will see later that this can even be different per workflow, per site, or per task. The workflows instructions catalog is where the workflow instructions files are uploaded to. Usually they go in the same catalog. But I'm not going to go over all these parameters at this point. What I want to point out is that in these parameters we have some parameters that are now interesting for our specific need, and that is metadata template in commission task. There are 2 of them here. There is metadata template all in commission task and metadata template in commission task. So this says that you can use some metadata template in a specific task. I'm going to copy this because I'm actually not going to set it here. You can use this place to set it, but if you set it, it's valid for every website, for every installation inside, for every workflow and for every task, unless you overrule it in that specific level. The second level in which you can set it is in the workflow itself, in the website itself. Sites in its folder has a file under the webinf, as you can see in sites webinf workflow manager.xml. Per default, this file can be empty because all your parameters are set in the EJAP in the client. If you don't have that setting in the client, they should be set here just by copying it in, and they will have that setting. If you are working with, if you kept the original installation in customizations, you will see that all these values are still in here, and in that case you can modify it here. Remember, whenever you restart Tomcat, if you have that file in your customizations folder, it will copy this version on top of this version, so you will lose it. So don't forget to make the changes actually here and restart Tomcat, or if you don't want to restart Tomcat, make them in both places. What I'm going to do is I can set it at this place. But as I said, I'm not going to do it in this example. In this example, I'm going to set it in this workflow. So if I go to my workflow, which is the category, I have a field called workflow parameters. And if I paste this in, I get the opportunity to modify that parameter here. These are my workflow parameters for that specific. So this is how you can personalize each workflow or each workflow task or each website. And I created a commission. I created a template called commission template. I will show you in a second. I created a commission template, and that defines which fields I will be allowed to edit. So if I have a look in my preferences and I go to my metadata templates, you see I have a commission template here in which I allow the user to set the nodes and, for instance, the status field. In this example, I'm gonna actually remove the status field because, or no, I'm keeping the status field. Just keep in mind that we will also be playing around with the status field in that specific or special task. So I also could have set, if you have here the commission task in my workflow, if I have the commission task in my workflow, I could have gone into this information window, which is the lowest level, where I also have this. So I could have pasted this in here, and that way it would change the behavior of that task. So top level is in the Cumulus preferences. Then you can differentiate per website in the workflow manager.xml. Then you can differentiate in the category information window here for all tasks in that workflow. And finally, the lowest level is to set it for one task, in which case you set it in the workflow parameters of this record. As I said, I have added it to this level, so for every commission task in this workflow it will have that behavior. So this was a little bit of explanation about the workflow parameters. Here's an overview. So it's the lower level always overrules the top level. So we've enabled the edit in the task. You have these parameters for a commission task just to be able to edit one record. You also have an edit all, which will give you a button to do a bulk edit on every record in your task. And you have the same for an approval task, where you could enable that functionality. So that's about it. We can now go over to running the workflow, and that's something we're going to do in the next movie. Thank you for joining, and see you soon.